Oh, whoops. Sorry. Excuse me for a second.
What's going on, my fellow programmers? Before we begin, I just want to let you all know if you're someone who's looking for a coach, a mentor to help you break into the industry without having to go back to school for a CS degree or go back to a boot camp, I do have a mentorship program available to anyone who wants to take that next step in their coding journey. I do have an application for that listed in the description below. So go ahead and apply if that's something you're interested in. But without further ado, let's hop right into the tutorial.
All right, so in this video, we have an expense tracker that displays our expense history in a table. So a user can go in and add an expense and add a category. So I'm gonna do a dining, it's $100. And I'm just gonna do this test. And you'll see here that the expense amount gets stored in this table. If I refresh my screen, you'll see that it's still going to be there. Let's say if I exit this tab and I go back in, you'll see that my expense from today on 12/14 is still there. From today, 12/14, I just chose 12/14 there. But anyways, so I can also go ahead and click a button to delete the expense, and then I'll have a default no expenses recorded. If I were to just click submit without putting in anything, you'll see that I get this message telling me to fill out all fields. Let's see what happens if I just do like one, it's still there. But if I put in everything, then I can get rid of that message, and then I have it back, my expenses back on my expense table. I'll just add another expense just so you guys can see that I can select an expense and delete a certain row. So let's delete that this first one here, and we'll see that the $500 one is still there. All right, so let's go ahead and build this using React. So let's open our terminal and let's create a React app, and we're going to run the command npx. So make sure you have npm installed in your machine, or else you won't be able to run this command. Create React app, and then the name of our app, so expense tracker. So just run this create React app command, and then the name of your app, which will be expense tracker. And let's let this run and give it a few minutes. All right, so my React app has been created using this npx command. So now I can cd into that expense tracker directory that I just created. And I can run npm start, and you'll get that live server. All right, we got our default create React app page here that's loading. Should have like the logo and then links to, read the React documentation, but we won't need all that for the purposes of this video. So let's go ahead and delete the stuff we don't need anymore. So go ahead and delete all the contents in app.css, and then delete everything besides the div in the app.js. And then now this logo is not being used, so I'll also get rid of that. And I'll get rid of this class name. Actually, I'll keep this class name app. I might use it later. Now if I save all this, now we should have a white page here. We do. All right, so now we have a clean slate. Let's go ahead and start creating that expense tracker. So first, I'm gonna go ahead and create my two components. So the form, which allows the user to enter expenses. So I'm gonna call that expense form. And then I'm going to also create the table. All right, so these are gonna be components that I'm gonna make myself. So let's go ahead and create a components folder. And then let's make the expense form first. So expense form.js, and then let's create it. export it so we can use it in other components. Should we put defaults? All right, let's import it. All right, got it imported. Let's go back into it. All right, and let's go ahead and create the HTML elements. So first, so in React, you have to surround everything in a div. So let's go ahead and create the header that has our title. Call it expense tracker with the H2 header. And then let's go ahead and create a form element. And in it, it will have the label for each field. I'm gonna do date of purchase first. And then my input field. And I'm gonna make it type date. So so that way by default, it'll make you choose a date. And then the next label for the next field is going to be my amount. And another input field to input the amount. And I'm gonna give that a type number. Since all I'm doing is putting dollar amounts there, I only want to limit it to numbers and not any text or anything. Then my next label is going to be my category. It's going to have the drop down to select the category. So it's going to be it's going to be a select tag with a bunch of options. So let's do select. And then let's put our options. So the first one is it's not going to have any value. This one's going to be my default. So I don't want anyone to select one. I just want this to be my placeholder, my default placeholder. And then let's go ahead and create the categories that you saw in the drop down. So I think I had, how many did I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 options. First one was build utilities. And let's give this value the same thing. Let's just map it over. They're all going to be whatever the option label is going to be the value. So let's do dining next. Next one is going to be retail purchase. And the next one is going to be my entertainment. And then the next one is going to be our travel category. And then last but not least, just our other, we're going to, for like any other thing that doesn't fall to other categories. All right, so we got all our options here. All right, let's do the description. give that label and then input field. We can type anything here, so I'm just going to make it a text field. And I'm going to put a placeholder as well. All right, and then I'm going to put a button to submit the expense. All right, so that's my form. And I'm getting an error that my expense table is not defined. So let's go ahead and create that real quick so we can see what our component looks like. Our expense table.js. So I'm going to create this element here. And make sure to export it so you can use it in another component. And then let's go ahead and import it here so we can get rid of that error. Save everything. All right, now our page should render. All right, so we got plain old, plain Jane web page with our form and then our expense tracker title. So let's go ahead and add functionality to our form. So I'm going to actually do that in our app.js first. So here I'm going to put all the functionality on here. And render the data as well. So my app is just going to have one property, which is going to be the expense data. This is going to render whenever the page first loads or whenever a user adds in another expense. So I'm going to use the useState hook here to update the state of the expense data. And initially it's going to be an empty array. So I'm not going to have anything when my face first renders. Let's let me import useState from React. All right, now it's the React hooks. And I'm also going to use another hook called useEffect. And that will render all my expense data whenever my page first initializes. So let's go ahead and create the useEffect function so we can allow that to happen. So first I'm going to have my stored data, which is going to come from my local storage from the browser, and I'll show you guys where that's at in a few minutes. So I'm going to use json.parse so my browser can read the data. And I'm going to get local storage.getItem. And so getItem takes in two parameters, the key and the value. So how the browser gets data is by reading the key, and I'm going to call it, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it expense data. However, if there's nothing there, I'm just going to do an empty array. And then I'm going to set the expense data to the stored data, whatever is in local storage. So if I have items here, I'll get whatever values that I find based on this key value. If not, then I'll have nothing. So that's what that's doing there. And I'm going to put an empty array. I'm not going to have the page mount again for any reason. So I'm going to put an empty array. That's what useEffect usually takes in, that second argument, to mount the component, to re-render again if there's a change in some state or some some function, some variable. So it's like a listener here. But I'm not doing anything with that. All I'm doing is just rendering data when the page first renders, or initializes, or mounts as the correct term. So let's add our functionality now to add an expense. So let's create a function. I'm going to take in my new expense as an argument. This is what I'm entering in the form. So I'm going to set expense data. This one's a little tricky to the previous data, meaning the data that's already there. And then any new data that comes through, I'm going to use a spread operator. So I'm going to take a copy of what's already in the web page. So this is what the spread operator. This takes a copy of an array and puts it in a new array. So basically I'm copying this and I'm putting this new expense in the previous data. That's what I'm doing here. So anything new will be added to the expense. Will be added to this expense data, which is an array. That's what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to return the new data. So that's all I'm doing. I'm changing the state, taking in whatever data is already there, copying it, and then I'm going to, that new expense that I'm adding, I'm going to add it to that array and then return it. All right, and then that's going to go in my expense form, which I'll show you guys in a few minutes. Now let's add delete expense. So I want to be able to add and delete, as you guys saw in the demo. So I'm going to pass in the ID of an expense. That's the only thing that's going to be different with each expense component or object. They're all going to have different ID. That's how I'm going to differentiate between the expense. So I'm going to set the expense data again with the previous data. So I'm taking whatever data I'm already having, and I'm going to do I'm going to do a pretty similar thing, but I'm going to remove instead of add. So new data, I'm going to filter out from the previous data array an expense. I'm going to filter out where the ID of the expense is not equal to the ID that's getting passed in. Then I'm going to reset my local storage. With the new data. The new data is going to have what filtered out the expense that I removed. And I'm going to return the new data. So this ID is an expense that I selected. I'm taking each expense, and whichever expense ID doesn't match the ID that I selected, I'm going to keep it in the new data, and then the ID that got selected is going to get removed. Essentially, I'm just filtering out one expense with a certain ID that I passed in. All right. And I also forgot, when I add expense, I want to set the item in local storage as well. So I want to set it in this expense data key. So I need to update my local storage with the new expense as well. So make sure that the keys all match. All right. So This one is adding to local storage. This one's filtering out from local storage, whichever ID doesn't match the expense that I selected on the table. All right, let's bring in these functions into each component. So my expense form, that's where I'm adding the form. So I'm going to create a property called onAddExpense. And then that's how I'm going to share the properties of my parent and child. So now it has a property of onAddExpense, and I'm going to add that functionality with the addExpense function. So that's what I'm doing in my form. On my table, I'm going to delete an expense. As you guys saw, there was a button in there that had that delete button. So I'm going to add the delete functionality onto the table. So I'm going to give it a property onDeleteExpense, and I'm going to add it here. And now I can pass in this function into the table as a from parent to child relationship. All right, now let's add logic to add an expense. So my expense form is going to have a lot of different properties. It's going to have the date. We're going to use useState to update the state. For some reason, it's not automatically letting me import useState, so I have to type it myself. So let's see. From React. And I'm going to initialize it as an empty string because I'm not going to have any values in the input field until I change it, go in and change it myself as the user. So all these are going to have an empty string. These are my fields on the form: the date, amount, category. Also going to be a empty string, set selected category, and then I'm going to do another to my description, set description. So it's following all the same pattern on the form. Initialize it as an empty string. And I'm going to also have a variable to keep track if my form is valid. So that way you get that error message in case you forget to type in something in one of the input fields. And my form by default is going to be true at first because I don't want an error message until I start typing stuff. All right, so let's submit the expense. So let's do const handle submit. I've done this demo multiple times in my other videos, so I'm not going to show you guys this. But the reason why I'm passing in E here and then doing event default, because when a form is submitted, it automatically refreshes the page. So that's the default behavior. So I want to prevent that from happening. I'm going to add that on submit event listener to the handle submit function. All right, so let's do a form validation. So if I don't have any date or no amount or no selected category or no description, if any of these don't have a value, then I'm going to set my form as valid to false because I want all my input fields to have everything. And then I'm going to return. I'm going to exit this function. Otherwise, I'm going to create an expense. So I'm going to create an object, a JavaScript object. My expense is going to have these properties. So the ID, so I can delete it. It's going to be a random number. So I'm just going to do math.random. And then I'm going to have the properties, the date, amount, selected category, and description. So my expense has all these properties which the user will enter into the form. I'm going to call the onAddExpense function from the parent component and put in this expense object. That way in here, that expense object is getting put into here. It's getting passed through all the way to this app.js. And then once I submit, I want to make everything empty. Again, I want to reset the state back to where it was. So all of the fields, I want them to not have any values anymore. And then I'm going to make my form valid again. So that error message goes away. Alright, so let's put the error message, let's put a paragraph below the button. Alright, so if my form is not valid, render this paragraph message. Please fill out all fields. All right, we've done a lot here, so let's just make sure that that part works. All right, yeah, see, so I have everything is empty. I have please fill out all fields message, so that's working as expected. All right, so now we're able to add an expense. Now let's add it to the table. So I'm gonna have a variable where my expense data row is null for now. We'll use that for later, but let's go ahead and create the table real quick. Give it a head, title, expense history. All right, let's go ahead and create the tables now. Give it a head. And a row for the headers. So what should I have again? I had date, amount, category, description, and then the actions. So 5. Need 5 rows. Or no, only 1 row, I'm sorry. 1 row, but 5 headers. Put that in the row. That'll be for my headers. All right, so the date, amount, description, and the actions. All right, and then that's our table header, and then the body, it's going to have the expense data row, which is nothing right now. Which doesn't have any values yet, so let's add values to it. So if expense data dot length, well, let me add a property to push in my expense data. So if I don't have anything, or if I do have values, then my expense data row is going to have all my expense data displayed on the table. So it's going to be another row with data. It's going to have my table data. So 5 of these. And the key is going to differentiate each element is going to be the ID of each expense. All right, now let's bring in our expense. Actually, and then the button here. And then we have an on click event on delete expense. So now I can delete an expense. I'm going to pass in that expense ID. And then I'm going to label it with the delete. All right, let's save that. Let's see what we have so far. And then we'll need to fix that in a second. Actually, we can go ahead and just check if it's an array. Get rid of that error right now. The expense data. I should get rid of that error now. All right, looks good. Yeah, looks good so far. All right, so let's do the last part of this if statement. Else, so if there's no data, then we'll display that no expense is recorded. So now we should see that no expenses recorded. Looking good. All right, let's add some functionality to our expense form so we can actually add an expense. So we have the form validation and we have the functionality, but let's add it to our HTML elements here. So So the first one, so form on submit, we're able to submit a form. But let's look at the state change for each component. So the first one, let me go to my input. I need to change the state of each component. So set date So whenever I type in something into the input field, I want to change the state of the date. So I'm going to do one for each field. So same thing with this one here. I want to change events. I want to take in what I'm typing and then set the amount. And then also the select. And then the description field. All right, so let's make sure that the state is being changed now whenever I make changes to the input field. So let's check our React Developer Tools. Make sure to download this separately. You will not have this by default, by the way, guys. Components. Let's go to our expense form. So this is our state. So let's see if these 4 empty strings change. So my date changes, my amount changes, my retail purchase changes, and my description changes. Yep. So state is actively being changed whenever we enter values in each field using the event.target.value when we change the state. And let me get rid of this required, or disabled, I mean. That way you can still see it. All right. Now we should be able to add an expense to our table. I know it doesn't look the best, but okay, so it looks like our form is still not valid. Okay, so now we need to add values. Make this a little nicer so you guys can read it better. To each field. So we need to add a value field and map it to each state change. So the input field, I want to put a value, and also the select tag. This one is for the amount. This one is for the selected category. And then description, the value. Description. All right, now that the values are mapped to each field, we should be able to add. Did I say everything? Oh, I see. So I go to app.js, and now I have that second property, expense data. So I can put it in the table. Now I can set it to the expense data. And now this expense data will pass through the table. So now we should get something going here. Let's check the table, since it looks like it's not rendering. Okay, this needs to be a function. An event needs to be an actual function. All right. That should fix the issue. Awesome. Cool. So our app's working as expected. It just doesn't look good just yet, but let's just add some more expenses. All right, let's delete that ADD description here, and then we should be left with this. Awesome. And then let's check our local storage. So if you go to the developer tools and go to the application, local storage, we see our key expense data, and it has the data that we have left. That retail purchase and that AFAF. All right, and let's style this a little bit. So I want my amount to have a dollar sign. So let's go ahead and just add a little dollar sign next to the variable. Let's go ahead and add Bootstrap classes. So let's go to the Bootstrap docs. And I'm just going to copy the link tag here, and we're going to put it in the index.html in the public directory. Put it in the head. Now we have access to Bootstrap classes. Let's do the table first. This is the smaller of the two. So the button, let's do a class. Let's put it inside the tag. But let's do a class of danger to make it red. And then our table, we want it to span the data here, we want it to span 5 columns. So we go across the entire table because we have 5, essentially we're going to have 5 columns. And center the text with Bootstrap. And let's do our table. With this Bootstrap class. Let's center the text. And make it a little bold. Give a table some Bootstrap classes, make it striped and bordered. All right, that's all I want to do for the table. Let's see what we have so far. All right, things are coming in order. All right, let's do the form. Got a lot of components to do for the form. Not going to spend a lot of time. You just got to look at the Bootstrap docs and add a class name instead of a class on React apps, and then you'll be able to access the styling. All my labels are going to have this class name of form label. So I'm going to copy and paste this. All the labels. It's going to get a little tricky with all these classes. give this a red text. Anytime y'all see alert for Bootstrap classes, it's usually like a red and white text. So we got all right, let's add some CSS to style everything else. There might be too many zeros for this RGBA code. I only need 3. Make it black. I know this button primary makes it blue, but I'm going to grab the class to make it like a certain shade of green, which Bootstrap doesn't have this certain shade that I want personally. I'm going to add some effects when I hover over the button with my cursor. I'm going to get a different shade of green. And a different shade of a border color. Then my delete button. Give it a different shade of red. And when I hover over my delete button, also want to give it different shade of red. Just like with my submit expense, I gave it a different shade of green. Then my warning message, I'm going to customize the color that I gave it. So Bootstrap, you can also use it as your CSS classes as well. It can be used interchangeably. And CSS classes will take priority, by the way, guys, because you're using class components. got these hex colors written down. So I'm trying to type them. All right, that should be the final product. Yep, everything looks the exact same. Let me go ahead and delete the local storage and all this will disappear. Just delete it. If I refresh, it'll disappear. Let's add an expense. Let's add one more just for the demo. All right, let's delete this one. Let's refresh. We still have our expense here. Let's just, got our warning message. All right, everything is now working as expected. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a good one. Peace out.